Choosing, choices. We all have choices to make. In a game like checkers, or if this were chess, each move you make could be good, could be bad. Depending on what you decide, you got to make the right choice. But if you don't make any choice, the game never goes anywhere and we just sit here and stare at each other. So you got to choose. But there's always risk. You might make that decision, you might go forward and like, oh no, they got me. But you might make a better move. You might make the right move. You might win the game. But the point is, like life, a game, there has to be a move. Somebody's got to do something. And so we are a church, and we're living in a time where we've got a decision to make. What are we going to do as a church? I mean, we do that daily. We may not realize we're doing that, but we're always making decisions. We make votes. We just decide to do things just spontaneously. We do all kinds of stuff because we know that God wants us to try, to experiment, to reach out, to take risk. When we invite someone to church, they might not come, but if we don't invite them, they certainly won't. When we do a new ministry, if we try to have something that we've never done before, we launch into some new project, there's a chance in that. There's a risk. It may not work, but it might. We have to continually adapt and be who we need to be at the moment we're in. What I want to do is to talk to you tonight a little bit more about choices that we make as we continue in this study that we're launching tonight called The Church After COVID. So, let's get our Bible out. Let's get started. So tonight we're going to begin our Bible study on our second choice. Last week we talked about life or death. I'm standing here among the ruins of a building, or a house, probably a house that existed a long time ago. And of course, like most old structures, things don't last forever, and it's crumbled. But what's really cool is the whole property is now a wedding venue, and the entire worship service this coming Sunday is set at Cirilla Farms, and I appreciate those folks for letting us go there. And this Bible study tonight, several pieces of it are filmed there as well. But as we begin tonight's choice, we have to think about last week. Last week we talked about how we have to choose life or death. And if we choose death, well, there's no reason for part 2 of this Bible study. That's it. But Randolph Memorial, we're not choosing that. We're choosing life. In fact, Jesus said that I have promised you life to the fullest. And that word means surplus, that it just looks like a cup running over. And so that's what we're going to choose as we think about the future of our church, the future of our ministry in this world as COVID one day will be gone. What will 2020, the rest of the year and next year, as we look into the next chapter in our church's life. And so we talked about that last week. So once we choose life, we then have a whole set of choices we can think about what life looks like. And so that's what's going to happen in the weeks ahead. So tonight, we're going to talk about a very important choice, and it is choose community over isolation. And that's what we're going to learn about today. I'm at a wedding venue right now. You can see all around that this is a place where people get married. Dance floors over there, the beautiful lights. I can hear the men outside working to get things ready. And the whole property is gorgeous. And the only thing missing is the bride, the groom, and the people ready to celebrate. It's like a ghost town because there's not a wedding going on. But if you can imagine on the days and the nights when this is being used, the same space, the same room comes alive. I've always been, maybe I'm weird, but I've always been fascinated by ghost towns, dystopian views in movies of cities totally empty, streets, no one there. I've thought about all the movies you and I have all seen, whether it's zombies or aliens that have taken over, whatever, where something that was once used by many is now empty. I think of different kinds of stories of people who faced isolation. And the weird thing is that some of our cities have kind of looked like dystopian futures. I mean, because business is shut down in some downtowns, they've seen animals come back into the streets. The water and the air is cleared up. It's almost like it's really happened. Thankfully, we haven't disappeared completely, but you get the point. It's almost like that isolation came anyway. But we know soon this room will be full of people partying. We know that. And we know the downtowns will get busy and the restaurants will fill. And we know we really don't live in an episode of The Walking Games. I don't know if you have any favorite movies or books about that. Probably the most famous isolation story I know isn't about zombies, not about aliens, but it's about Tom Hanks washed ashore on an island. Have you seen Castaway? And what's funny in that movie is a perfect example of my whole Bible lesson tonight. He's on an island, totally isolated, and can't stand it. Because people aren't made for isolation. People are made for community. So our choice, community or isolation, we hunger for community. So you've seen the movie. Tom Hanks created a friend named Wilson out of a volleyball because he's so desperate for community. I'm looking forward to when our community can be flesh and blood, but I'm glad that we're still keeping community in the way that we are through technology, because our very beings beg for it. So, as you think about church and what churches are like, the truth is the popular notion of church is that it's a bunch of hypocrites. I mean, that's what, if you ask somebody who doesn't go to church, that's what they say about church. And that could be an excuse, just somebody being cruel, someone being, just labeling us all like, you know, if you ever see a movie or TV show and they show a minister, they tend to be crooked. They tend to be crazy. And so culture sometimes paints us with broad strokes. But if we were honest, it hurts us to say this, there are some dysfunctional preachers, amen, and there are some dysfunctional churches. There are some churches that they just don't get along. There's some churches that just don't have a focus. Those churches can't choose life because they've made their path. But as I said just a moment ago, if we're going to choose life, that means we have to ask ourselves, then what kind of church will we be? What does it mean to be choosing community over isolation? How does that work out? So what I want to do is I want to look at the early church, that church that started a long time ago that can teach us a little bit about our own church today. And so I want to read to you from the Bible. The book of Acts is a great book. If you want to get a sense of what the church was after Jesus left, it's the book of Acts. In fact, the next 2 Sundays I'll be looking at a couple of passages in Acts to kind of get our minds focused as we're headed towards Pentecost. Anyway, Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 47 describes what that early church was doing. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe, and many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. That's a pretty cool snapshot, isn't it? I mean, what you see is that they got serious about the things that they had been taught by the people who knew Jesus, their leaders. And they were all about being fellowshipping, growing, spending time together, having fun together. The breaking of bread is a meal, but also communion as they took the Lord's Supper. They prayed. They were in awe at all that God did, at the wonders and signs that God was doing. And as I said, they held everything in common. Now, that's pretty strange, but they actually pulled their resources together. Now, I'm not advocating that today, but we do financially give to keep our church going, and you've been very faithful at that. But they did all this, and they continued to meet, and they continued to have glad and sincere hearts, praising God. And because of that, people had favor on them. I just said some people look at church in a negative, not this. And the truth is, some did make things up about them in the first century. Some did attack them, some did ridicule them, and some did lie. But people who really got to know the members, though, knew that it wasn't true because they knew these people. And they knew these people were something, at least in the beginning. Later, when you read in the New Testament, you'll find churches like the one in Corinth that really strayed and had a lot of problems. Then you'll find other churches like the one at Philippi that Paul found great joy in. Churches are made up of people, and people aren't perfect. But in the beginning, though, they were getting things together and they were doing pretty good. But like all churches, I don't know if you've thought of that, but every church when it starts, no church starts and says, well, we know this is only going to last a while. It's like I'm sitting in a wedding venue. No couple that stands on that platform thinks, well, we're getting married today, but this will probably last maybe a year, or it'll last as long as it lasts. Everyone who makes those vows intend to follow them. They intend to make a lifetime together. Sometimes they don't make it. But again, if we choose life, we'll more than make it. We will thrive. So, we're going to choose life. Now, the second choice, though, says, what's that life like? And that life is like community. Life is not isolation where you're separate from everybody. That's not living. Community, and we all know from being separated lately, we need this. So, when people say, well, I'm a Christian, I follow Jesus, why do I need to go to church? We were born to be in a community so that we can do all the things I just read to you, so that we can grow and do more. I mean, the truth is, I could give money to help somebody, but when we pull all of our money together, suddenly we can do big things. I can do some things to help people, but when we pull all of our resources, it's kind of like Every year we gather food and we take it at Christmas to the cheer boxes that we do, and we meet at Amelon and do that. If only I was responsible to bring food for the families of my community, I might could fill one box. But because all the churches come together, all the Christians come together, my goodness, we're able to fill 150 to 200 boxes. And Randolph Memorial alone, because we all come together as our individual church, we make a pretty big dent in that. The power of being together. And so God grows this church. I want to give you two myths that existed, and I'll make sure you don't get them. And that is, myth number one, is that we are that because we are a society of individuals, that community is dead. In America, we are so lucky often. In recent times, we are reminded how much we really have because we've not been able to do much. And so we realize that we've been given a lot as a nation. We have a lot. Even now, we still have a lot compared to a lot of countries in wealth and food and resources. But even though America prides itself into being an individual, the rugged individual, and I am free, and I'm an American, and all that, we can't do it by ourselves. I mean, I didn't build the road I drove to get here to where I'm at right now. I didn't build the car I rode in to get here. The clothes I make, I didn't make them myself. I am a network of individuals, and so are you. Frankly, being an individual is great, but an individual does not mean you don't need community. So get that. That's one thing. The other thing is that the other myth is that, well, no one in our culture is interested in God anymore. So the myth number one is because we're individuals, people don't want to come to church, they don't want community. It's not true. And number two, people say, well, they don't want to come to church because people don't need God anymore. No, the truth is the statistics show us that religious attendance is wavering. Statistics show us that people are kind of losing interest, not everybody, but that there is a growing younger movement to walk away from religion, organized. And that scares those of us who have invested our lives, like myself, into organized religion. But when you really talk to those people, they don't want to give up on God. Some do, but that's still a minority. The majority are interested in God. They just see all the breakdowns and dysfunction in churches, and they just think there's got to be a better way to do this. And you know what? They're right, in the sense that the way to do this is not to be dysfunctional. So we got to get it together. All these choices I'm going to lay out in the weeks ahead will help us with that, to see that if we get it together, people do want community, they desire community, and they desire more, hopefully God. They just don't know that the church is the one that can do that. We have to show them we can. We have to show them that we can be the beloved community and that we can bring them closer to God. And I think when we do that, people will. And maybe during this time, people are going to start seeing that. I don't know. That's what I'm hoping for the future. Folks, I want Randolph Memorial Baptist Church to know that we've still got a mission, and there are people who still need this mission. We've just got to get out there and show it. Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything, except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Matthew 5 through 7 is the Sermon on the Mount, and I encourage you to study that. I mentioned it last week. The Beatitudes are in those texts as well. And right after he gives the Beatitudes, he gives chapter 5, verses 13 through 16, which you heard just a moment ago, which is called the Salt and Light passage. This is a challenge on how we can become a community church, not an isolated church. When Matthew recorded these words, the church was a small voice in a large sea of non-Christian beliefs. The church was a drop in the bucket in the culture around it. They were facing rejection at every turn. And in that culture, he gave us the words of Jesus and the challenge we need today. We may not be the loudest voice, but we can be the most powerful. In fact, sometimes quieter voices are the most powerful, and we can make a difference. The reality is that those louder voices have bigger budgets in our world. Those louder voices have a bigger presence physically. All around us, there are voices pulling people in those directions, and we may feel as if our voice can't be heard. But Jesus reminds you, do you hear this? That you are the salt of the earth. In the text, you is actually plural. Jesus is talking to all of us, the church. And if we are the salt in the world, well, when I say I want some salt, I don't separate it particle by particle, do I? I don't pull out a little tiny. How could you do that? Salt is community. It's all together. You can't separate it. In fact, what good will one little piece of salt be? You want salt. It's plural. Reminds us that we are the light of the world. Another two images, salt and light. And you saw the text. The light should not be hidden. The light shining isn't to point to ourselves, but point to God, and that God is the source of our light. The function of the light is to show others what's already there. God's already there. We're just pointing the way. So here we are, church. Do we want to be a community, or do we want to be a sea of strangers? Do we want to be a community, or do we want to keep people out? Do we want to be a community, or then we have to remember that a community is diverse. We don't all think and look alike. A community is grace-filled. God gave me a lot of grace, and I better give a lot of grace to my friends, right? And to strangers and even enemies. We are to be a church that's creative, innovative. We've been forced to do that. I've been forced to do things I never thought I'd do because I'm lazy. I like the way I'm doing things, and suddenly something like this happens, and we got to change. We're supposed to be spirit-filled. We're talking about that in worship these days. Sum this up. I want to wrap this Bible study up. And what I want to do is just bring it back home to Randolph Memorial Baptist. I believe that this study has to be very practical, and I want it to be. So here's what I want to do. I want to make sure we understand that basically there are two relationships that this study addresses that I think have been good at. But when we enter a post-COVID world, whenever that is, we need to take the lessons we've learned during this COVID time and really accelerate what we're doing and enhance it. What do I mean? Well, the two relationships the book I was reading mentioned were the relationships we have outside in the community and the relationships we have toward one another. Churches that are unhealthy have a problem with one or both. There are churches that they don't get along. They don't like each other. They do great ministries outside, but they don't get along, and that makes them unhealthy. There are other churches that get along and love each other, and they're all about pastoral care and fellowship, but they don't do anything outside of the walls of the church, and that's unhealthy. Then there's some that don't do either well. One of the things that drew me to this church so many years ago when I became your pastor was that you really do both well. And during the quarantine time, we've really missed some of this, but we've adapted and used technology and innovation to keep doing it. So when we enter a post-COVID world, I don't want to leave behind what we've learned during this COVID time and just go back to what we always did, but I also don't want to leave what we did that was working and just do this. What do I mean? We have used online ministry technology well, but when we can get back together, I don't want to just never get together again and just do it on technology. No, that's crazy. But when we get back together, I don't want to abandon all of our technological ministries that we've launched and done. And I know we can't do both to the fullest, so we need to look at what works from each and blend it together and be strong, and also look for new ways to do ministry. So let's think about this. The relationship outside of the church. It has been said that a church should be more out there than in here. Boy, has this time in history made us get out there, but not quite. We've been out there in our houses. We haven't been out there in the streets, but we've been outside the walls of the church. So when it's safe to get out more, we need to keep getting out. And you've been doing that in the history of this church. I could list all the ministries, Helping Hands, Neighbors Helping Neighbors, Interfaith Outreach, all the projects, all the ministry. We're going to keep doing that. We're also going to look for more when it is needed. If the economy it does not recover very fast, we're going to be needing to do more. But we also will continue to take care of the ministries within discipleship, Bible study. We need to come back. We need to be together. There is no comparison to a face-to-face discussion about God. We need both. However, and bear with me, however, we can do this. We can. We can together accomplish even more because now we've learned there are new ways to do ministry outside and within. We can have Bible studies. We can do ministries using technology and being literally present. We don't have to choose. We need to do both. We can stream our worship service for those who can't come while meeting in person one day. That'll be great. We can do Bible studies inside the church, but we can have some outside. We can have a Zoom Bible study for people that particularly younger folks, and keep on doing that. We could hybrid a committee where half the committee is present in that conference room discussing the ministries and mission of the church, where 2 or 3 members who travel and can't be there physically could be on a laptop in the middle of the room on the table participating and sharing their ideas. We can do lots of stuff. We can put music and videos that are spiritually helpful on the Facebook page or other platforms to encourage you during the week until we're together again. I mean, there's so many cool things we can do. And so this time we've been learning that no matter what we do, we are choosing community. We're not going to sit in a little corner by ourselves. We're not going to be a church that doesn't engage its community. We're going to do both. Now, one last thing. This was not in the book I read, but this is us. Years ago, before I came, you went through a mission and vision statement at Randolph. And you came up with 3 phrases that you used to use. Now, we don't use them that much. They're not on our publications. It's not that we're against them. It's just time moves on, and that was a long time ago. But I remember when I came, those phrases were in-reach, which is the pastoral care, outreach, which we've talked about, but also upreach, which is connecting to God. Well, I think the in-reach and outreach, when that happens, we are also obviously, Jesus said, love God, love others. Jesus even said, love your enemies. So when we do all this, oh my goodness, it comes alive. So I'm excited. We've talked about the first week, choosing life over death. And once we choose life, now we're going to have all these choices each week we're going to talk about. And this one is very clear. Choose community, not isolation. Thanks be to God on that, right? Well, let's have a prayer. God, thank you for this study. I pray that what we've talked about, that it will speak to people and help them in all that they do, in all that they are called to do as your people. Thank you for Randolph Memorial Baptist Church. Be with us always. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.